And welcome to this edition of Celebrity Spotlight, brought to you by Mighty Blaze. Brought to you by Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Robin Kall, Reading with Robin, and now I'm going to introduce our incredible guests. We've been having the best time in the green room chatting, and it's always so much fun back there. And here we go. Our first guest, Brad Aronson, is all about kindness. After college, he started iFrontier with a friend, which grew into one of the largest and top-rated digital ad agencies in the US and boasted clients like Universal Studios, Time Warner, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, which eventually sold to Microsoft. Today, he invests in startup companies and supports youth nonprofits. He's the board president of Big Brothers Big Sisters Independence Region and of HopeWorks in Camden, a program that provides tech training, jobs, housing, coaching, and support to help amazing young people in one of America's poorest cities succeed in life. He's also got a fabulous blog called Brad Aronson about people and organizations that inspire him. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And our celebrity host, our dear Jane Green, who's extraordinarily generous. She's the beloved author of 20 novels, including 17 New York Times bestsellers.
18.
Caroline Levitt wrote 17.
I'm claiming every one of them.
I didn't write this. I should do a check. 18, including 18 New York Times, a million New York Times bestsellers, one cookbook, and various short stories published in over 25 or 26 languages. She has over 10 million books in print worldwide, but that's not all. Jane's also been part of ABC News team and had her own radio show on BBC Radio London and has a weekly column in the Lady magazine, England's longest running weekly. And to make her life even more delicious, she's a graduate of the International Culinary Institute in New York. Kirkus has praised her latest novel as compelling summer read and rates Publishers Weekly. Green writes with a clear, unfettered voice, filling this page turner with plot twists and hinting at the power of forgiveness, always full of heart, always a page turner, like the best of all comfort food. So looking forward to this. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.
Now, how are we gonna? Are you gonna start? Can I start?
I actually am the host. I am almost like Endora now and invisible-ish.
Do you just sit quietly in the background?
I'm not good at that.
No, I know that about you.
Yeah, we know each other well, and Brad's like, "Oh, are they going to let me talk?" So you guys have your conversation, and I'll just.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in just to tell Brad again how much I loved his book, and especially in these times that are so filled with fear and anxiety, and I have long believed that life is where you look, and that, you know, when you look for the good in life, in people, you will find the good. So it is all about where you put your focus, and this book, Humankind, made me cry on every page, and it is just a series of these extraordinarily beautiful stories of small acts of kindness. One of the acts of kindness that you talk about, Brad, is listening more. So that's the one thing I'm not very good at. So I'm going to try and actually ask questions rather than just talk. So what I'd love to hear a little about how this book came to be. I know it was when your wife was diagnosed with leukemia. I hope that she is fine now, but can you tell us a little more about the genesis of this book?
Absolutely. So, and my wife is doing great. She is in great health, thankfully, and most importantly. So there were two genesis for the book. I was attending the graduation ceremony of a mentee of mine. She graduated from a high school in Philadelphia, where because of where the students who go to that high school come from, it's not expected that they'll all graduate high school, and it's expected that if anyone, only a small percentage will go on to college. And at her graduation, the speaker pointed out that every student who graduated had been accepted to college. And it was incredible. And he said, if you look in the news tomorrow, you won't see anything about it. So of course, the next day I get up, I'm looking online, I look in the papers, and there was nothing And I thought, there has to be more good news out there. So I should start writing some of it. So I'm writing about good news. And then about 6 months later, Mia was diagnosed with leukemia. And the leukemia she had is a 2.5-year treatment protocol. So we had a long treatment ahead of us. And you're going to the hospital every day, some weeks, 4 days a week. And the nurses were suggesting you should really go to this conference for young caregivers and young cancer patients. And we were saying, there's no way we want to go to this conference. We spend all our time in the hospital. Do we want to spend our free time at a cancer conference? But anyone who's been in treatment knows the nurses are just amazing, unbelievable. And we decided that if they thought we should go there, we should probably go. So we went, and there was a woman who spoke who was a patient advocate. And she said, if you're going through this treatment for 2.5 years, you need a project, because a project will help you focus on something besides treatment, and it'll be a distraction. So Mia chose as her project to write in a journal. I chose to work on this book. And our son, who overheard us talking about projects, decided he'd play wiffle ball for 200 days in a row. And all of us did achieve our goals.
Awesome. Wow.
I love the idea of taking a project in times of adversity, taking on projects to take your mind off things. It's one of the things. There was so much in your book that resonated with me. I'm going to jump around a bit because every time you speak, it kicks off a thought. But one of the things that you speak about in the book is the act of doing something, especially when people are ill or need help in some way, that so many of us tend to say, well, let me know if there's anything I can do. What can I do for you? But of course, what that does is it puts the onus back on them. And so few of us are able to ask for help. And there's a wonderful story about the Welters, which I'm going to ask you to tell a bit later on, and asking for help and what happened for the service dog for their autistic son. But where am I going with this? I knew I'd be talking too much. Tell me about the sort of how you realized that love is a verb, that actually, you know, loving people is about doing something. It's not asking what you can do. It's thinking of things you can do and just doing them. What made you realize that?
So there were so many things that made me realize that. So when Mia was first diagnosed, she immediately had to go to the hospital and stay there for a month. So all of a sudden, she's in the hospital. I'm at home, want to be with her, want to be with our son. Tons of stuff is going to slip through the cracks, especially since generally she is the organized one who makes sure everything runs. And people just started stepping up. So her friend Dawn sent me an email, said, I know that Jack loves Little League. You probably don't know, but Little League registration is this weekend. I will register you, and I'm going to make sure that Jack gets on a team with a parent who could drive him to practice. And this is the city of Philadelphia. This is a big Little League. They have a policy, like, you can't get on teams. He got on a team with a friend who could drive him, and she took care of that. And it was just amazing. And I wouldn't have even thought that I needed it. But she did that and set that example for me. And then, you know, we had neighbors who would call, and our neighbor Vicky would call and say, hey, Brad, I'm going to the supermarket. What can I get for you? And it's like, okay, good. Here's exactly what I need. And everyone wants to help, but when they're really specific, it makes it easy and they do something, because it's hard to think of what you need. You're just so overwhelmed if someone says, how can I help? Like, I had no idea.
Right. And I think as well, people are worried about doing the wrong thing. But the truth is, when you're helping and it's coming from this purely altruistic place, there is no wrong thing. I mean, you could go out and shop and buy entirely the wrong food and it wouldn't matter, because it's the act of kindness and of doing it that is what makes the difference and what makes people feel loved.
So you encapsulated everything right there. So a lot of the people I talked to in the book had gone through really rough times. And what they all said was, it meant so much that someone saw me. You don't have to do the right thing. You don't have to do the perfect thing. You just have to recognize, you know what? I see you're hurting, and I'm just here because I love you.
Yeah.
And I'm dropping something off because I love you.
Okay, and I'm going to cry again. Thank you for that. And I referred earlier to this story that just really stuck out for me about a family called the Welters who had an autistic son, and they really needed a service dog for their son. And the service dog, I think, was going to be $15,000. Is that correct? Did I pull that figure out? Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about the story? Because the reason I love this story is because in this instance, she was able to overcome her fear and shame and whatever it is that stops us from asking, this terror of being vulnerable. And she asked for help for her son. And can you tell us the story?
Absolutely. So Stephanie Welter, her son has autism, and he had a very hard time. So if something got out of place, he would have a terrible tantrum and hurt himself. So there's a risk that if she wasn't watching, he might hurt himself. He couldn't be successful in school, and there was health risks and the emotional burden of seeing your kid who can't interact with other kids and has all these problems. And there are service dogs that can completely transform a child's life. And she knew that this service dog could transform her son's life. And there's an amazing nonprofit, For Paws for Ability, that provides service dogs to kids. And most service dog agencies don't provide dogs to kids because it's very difficult. But this one does. And because it's so expensive, they ask the families to raise $15,000, which is a very small portion of the total cost.
Yeah.
And Stephanie told me, like, she had never asked anyone for money. She didn't even tell people the full extent of what was going on in her life, but she had to do this for her son because she saw how much it could help. So the first thing she and her husband did is they just put a little note in with their Christmas letter and said, you know, our son, you know, really could use a service dog, and here's how the dog will change his life. And people started sending in donations. And then For Paws for Ability got a story placed in their local newspaper. And they got a call from some high school students. We read about you. Can we do a fundraiser for you? There was a women's accordion group that called them and said, hey, we raised $200 for you, or something like that. And all these strangers came out of the woodwork, including a woman who said, I talked to my restaurant, because she was a waitress there, and the owner said, we can do this dinner and the proceeds will go to help get a service dog. And what Steph and her husband thought would take 2 years to raise money for, they were able to get very quickly. And the service dog completely changed their son's life. I mean, this was a kid who could not sleep through the night. A lot of children with autism, they can't sleep, which means no one in the family sleeps. The night they got their dog was the first night he slept through the night. And the dog is trained to help him relax, so he didn't try to hurt himself. And he went from not being able to succeed in school to suddenly jumping ahead of his education plan and being able to go to a class with all the other kids in his school. And it was amazing. And you talked to her, she's like, you know what did it? It was all those people who donated $10 and $20. It's people, and you don't think that $10 and $20 can make a difference, but all these people did it, and it changed our life.
Yeah. And I love that it started with her sending out the Christmas letter and just saying, we need some help, because I think that's so often the hardest thing to do. One of the things that you talk about in the book is that your father, Joe, was kind. I mean, he really taught you how to be a kind person. And not all of us had, you know, parents like yours. Not all of us were brought up with a spirit of kindness. So for those for whom it may not come naturally, where do you start? How do you start?
There's a couple ways that I suggest starting. One is, if you look around, most people are extremely kind, and you tend to see what you're looking for. So if you look for the acts of kindness, you'll find them and be able to say, I like what that person's doing, I want to model it. So if I go and read the news every day, I'm going to see many of the bad things that are happening in the world. But there's also websites full of good news where I can see good deeds that are happening and read them and model that behavior. And I'd also say, there's no right or wrong way to do it. To what you said, Jane, it's just about doing something, doing anything. So when people are going through a rough time, I remember when times were hard for us, there was a parent in Jack's class who sent an email and she said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so, my daughter's in your son's class, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking of you and I'm with you." And I remember, like, that made me cry, because you're going through a tough time, and just, as I said before, like, just to be seen, to be heard. So I think just reaching out to people and sending them a note. Someone dropped a magazine in our mailbox. They were thinking of us, and that makes a huge difference.
I love this concept of that you just talked about, which is that life is where you look. That really, it's perception is reality. It's your choice whether to look at the things that are scary and frightening and the negative things, or whether to look at the grass growing and the spring bulbs and the good things that we have in life. I think sometimes it can be challenging to get there. And I think actually for me, what changed my life was learning about gratitude and putting my focus immediately on the things that I'm grateful for when I feel myself going into that negative place. And the other thing is acts of service. As you said, most people are kind, and often, if you're not feeling good, doing something good for somebody else will actually change the way that you feel. So you may be coming at it from selfish reasons, but it has a happy outcome for everyone in the end. Where did you find, because there are so many stories in this book, where did you find the stories?
So I found the stories a mix of places. Because I'm really involved with youth-related nonprofits, I'm surrounded by amazing social workers. And I asked them, like, tell me a story where the smallest thing, where 2 words saved someone's life, where a note changed someone's life. And then in addition to that, I started asking all my friends and everyone I knew. And what was interesting is some of my friends had done the most incredible things, and they never mentioned it. It was their spouses who would say, well, do you know what Alex does? So Alex, who's in the book, who goes running with the man who has Alzheimer's, he had been running every Saturday with this guy to keep him company, and said this guy could continue his running. I never knew that. He never mentioned anything till his wife told me when I said, do you know anyone or any of these acts? So I feel like it's all around us. And when you ask, you'll find out. And then also, because I'm writing good news stories on my blog, people will email in with things that they've seen, which just blow me away.
There's also something lovely about the unspoken kindnesses, and so that you have to be told by a spouse. So it's not, I'm seeing people doing incredible things during these quarantine times, and the things that are my favorite are not the things that have their names plastered all over it. Like, I've put this together, I'm running this fund, I'm raising money for this, and it's all me. It's the people who are doing it very quietly and behind the scenes and not asking for acclaim or attention, and which is really, I find, so moving.
That's completely the way I love to see it. And it's also why most of the stories in my book, it's written from the perspective of the person who was helped. So, when I went around asking what changed your life, and someone would tell me, they're expressing their gratitude. They're so happy to tell the story. And then when they give me the phone number of the person who helped them, that person's super humble, and it wasn't really a big deal, but it was a huge deal. Yeah. And what's also incredible is probably in a good percent of those stories, the person whose life was totally changed can't find the person who did it, because at the time it was this small act, and neither of them realized that it would be so life-changing. And it's just goes to the point of we don't know the huge, wide sweeping impact we could have by being nice.
Yeah. I just was reading today, somebody on Facebook, an acquaintance of mine in London, was standing in line for something, and a homeless man was shuffling from person to person, and she thought, oh God, he's coming to me, he's going to ask for money. And before he even had a chance to speak, she said, I'm sorry, I don't have any cash, I only have credit cards. And he said, oh, I'm just hungry. And she said, what do you want to eat? And he said, a sandwich, and she went into whatever store she was going into, and she bought him not just a sandwich, but a sandwich and chocolate and fruit and like a hot, and just in his face, and I know that feeling. You sort of forget. So often I think we become so self-absorbed, we forget about just basic humanity. And when people are not like us, we think that they're undeserving somehow. And I love those tiny acts that you write about so beautifully in your book. I have to just ask, I'm digressing slightly, but have you ever come across the psychologist John Gottman?
I have not.
So it would be something for you to look up, because John Gottman is a very well-known psychologist in New York who has written about kindness for years, and specifically kindness in marriages and in relationships, and how truly the key to a happy marriage is kindness, and not necessarily the overt kindnesses of things like bringing your partner a cup of coffee in bed, which is lovely, but so often it's the small kindnesses, the kindness of attention. And I think it would be something that you'd find fascinating. Anyway, back on track. Some me, has writing the book changed you in any way?
So it has. I mean, there's some important things were reinforced for me. And one is, you don't have to solve people's problems. So many people in the book, and my wife also reminds me of this, when people have a problem, they don't necessarily want you to solve it. They often just want someone to listen to them. And you could ask, like, can I do this? But that's not needed. And I think that also keeps people from being there, because they don't know what to do and they're afraid, I don't know what to do. All you have to do is listen in a lot of those cases. And it's life-changing. And then, one story that really impacted me was my friend Tony. So Tony is an amazing guy. I met him when we were both social workers working in a group home together. And he has continued to he's devoted his life to helping young people. And he was driving with his daughter, and there was a homeless woman on the street who had a sign. And his daughter said, "What does that sign say?" He said, "Oh, it says, like, I'm hungry. Do you have anything to eat?" And his daughter said, "Well, why don't we give her something?" And he thought, oh my goodness, I spent my whole life helping kids, helping families. And because I'm in a city and I see homeless people all the time, I'm just driving by and not seeing this woman as a person. And, so of course he stopped, gave her his lunch, and recommitted himself. And it also reminded me, like, when I'm walking around Philly with our son, Jack, I've got to make sure I'm acknowledging everyone I see, and keeping in mind that, everyone is a person, an individual. And especially when we're in a hurry, it's easy to just kind of walk past people. We're in a hurry, we got things going on, but take the time, take the 2 minutes to be nice. If nothing else, like acknowledging people and saying hello.
Mm. Have you noticed any changes in that during this period? Have you noticed people being more friendly or more willing to connect?
Absolutely. I think that people are really looking for ways to make a difference now. So I believe everyone wants to make a difference. Everyone thinks about it. And now people are doing more than ever before. So we have different neighborhood groups, and you always see on the message boards, I'm going to go get food. Who needs food? Or if someone needs a mask, I've got extra masks. And everyone wants to find ways to help. Yeah. And I think life has slowed down. Everyone's at home, and with that slowing down, people are reflecting on what's important and how they can contribute. And it's kind of awesome to think that once this is over, that will likely carry through. All these new habits and going above and beyond will carry forward.
God, I hope so. I really do hope so. Do you think that you have any other books in you? Is there a sequel?
I love writing. I've been writing since elementary school, and my family makes fun of me because I've always been talking about writing a book. And every year, actually, at our holiday celebration, my brother makes a video about the book that hasn't been written. And now it has been written.
What's he going to do this year?
There's definitely other books that I'd like to write. I love writing, and I love sharing just beautiful stories that I hope will inspire people.
So I feel like you could start the new chicken soup for the soul, whatever this, this version could be. And I will say as well, like I'm addicted to podcasts. I haven't been able to read. In fact, your book is the first book I've been able to read in weeks. I haven't been able to read. I haven't been able to write. The only thing I've been able to do is binge watch Ozark. Is it Ozark or Ozarks? But season 3, just extraordinary. And listen to podcasts. But even the podcasts that I listen to religiously, The Daily, This American Life, The New Yorker, I can't listen to them right now because it's all doom and gloom. I mean, I was listening to This American Life and it was about the economic collapse of the workers on the streets of New York. I'm like, oh, this is too close to home. I just can't listen to that. So I really like this idea of this sort of the focus on the good and the positive, and your book is the absolute best way to feel better about life for anybody out there listening. Robin, you've been shockingly quiet because I've been talking too much. I'm sure you want to jump in.
No, I mean, I certainly agreed and echoed everything that you said. And when you were talking about love as a verb, Jane, I was thinking of your dear friend. And when you wrote the book and you talked about what you did when she was sick. And so I thought that's where you were going with that.
Well, that's what I was thinking of. I mean, that was really, I wrote a novel a few years ago that in America was called Promises to Keep, but in the UK it was called The Love Verb, because it was, my best friend was diagnosed with a particularly aggressive form of cancer. This was back in 2009. And 3 of us gave up our lives for a year to take care of her, to be her advocates, her caregivers. And it was just the most extraordinary gift. She died. And walking alongside somebody on that journey, it taught me what love is. And that was the first time that I learned that love is a verb, that love is in the doing. And I remember just feeling so powerless, and I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know what to do. And in the beginning, when she couldn't even really talk about it, she wasn't ready to see anyone. So I just thought, you know what? I'm going to send her an email every day that's going to be called the Evening Report. And it's not going to be about fucking cancer and how sick I feel and what can I do. It's going to be about all the stupid, funny, embarrassing things that have happened to me during the day that she should have been there for, but I'm going to fill her in on this with the Evening Report. And actually, I didn't hear, I mean, this was right in the beginning, before we sort of stepped up to be her before we sort of knew quite how serious it was. After about 3 weeks, she phoned me and said, okay, I want to see you. She said, your emails have been a lifeline, because they were the only thing she was receiving that didn't define her as somebody who had cancer. And I really learned it's the doing. You know, I remember buying some cute pajamas and just dropping them off on her doorstep. And that was when I learned. And by the way, I was not raised in a house where people did things for other people. You know, this had to be learned behavior for me. But it absolutely changed the course of my life.
It's incredible. And so how did you learn it?
I mean, I think just because I'm not very good at being powerless. I'm too much of a control freak. And when I really had no control, I did the only thing I could do, which was send her these emails, send her pajamas. I ended up cooking for her family. What I do a lot of the time is feed people. That's how I show people I love them. But it just, what it showed me was that I couldn't wait for her to say, this is what I need you to do, because she wasn't in a position where she was able to do that. And I couldn't sit there and wait for that, because it was too frightening for me doing nothing. So I just did something. I did the only things I could think of, and they turned out to be the right things. And even if, as we said earlier, even if they'd been the wrong things, they would have been the right things.
You are an amazing friend.
She is.
Beautiful.
it all came from your heart, Jane. I mean, that's where I thought you were going with that. I was like in your head, and then we went another direction. But I just think that is so powerful, and there's so much to connect on that. And people will think of their own friendships or times, because it's awkward and uncomfortable, and people don't want to do the wrong thing. But doing nothing is never really the right thing.
Can I tell you what I think made me think of it was actually reading the book that, what's her name? Carol Radziwill, who was married to Anthony Radziwill, Lee Radziwill's son. She was best friends with John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carol. Her husband at the time and John F. Kennedy Jr. were best friends, and her husband was diagnosed with cancer. I believe it was testicular cancer. I might be wrong. But I remember in Carol Radziwill's biography, she wrote about how when her husband was in hospital for cancer treatment, Carolyn Bessette Kennedy breezed in with tons of photographs of his family and decorated the hospital room with all of these photographs so that it wouldn't feel like a hospital room. So he'd be able to, every time he woke up, he'd be able to see pictures of the people he loved. I think she may have brought like throws and things. And that has stuck with me forever, because again, who would ever think to say, you know, what can I do for you? Oh, you know what? I'd really love pictures of my family. Like, nobody's going to ask for that. And yet, what a gift.
Yeah.
So that was my kind of life-changing thing that I read, I think, that really sort of gave me direction when my friend was sick. So so on that note,
Wow.
This is just a glorious book.
Do you
Humankind.
Brad Aronson. I have it with me.
Yes.
Oh, good. Will you hold it up? But this is BYOB, Brad. Love it. What a gorgeous cover, too.
Thank you.
Humankind, changing the world, one small act at a time. It's just beautiful, beautiful. And I wish you every success with it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time to read my book and to interview me. I appreciate both of you.
Oh, this is amazing. This is a movement, Brad. I just see this going on. And when your brother does his next toast, tell him there's more coming.
Yes.
We hear more about this brother. And thank you so much, Brad and Jane. This was beyond delightful. What a way to spend an afternoon. And to everybody who's watching, on behalf of A Mighty Blaze, this is Celebrity Spotlight, and we'll see you again next Thursday. And thank you for tuning in. You can all wave. You guys can hang out there. Bye.